This event's going to cost us $1.5 million. And I got outside the stadium and I was like, I can't get back in. There's 8 years of thoughts that have gone into this event. I'd had over 1,000 days accumulated in training. The upgrades to tracks was nothing as astronomical as what we saw with shoes.
All right, Troopy, thank you, mate, for jumping on. For anyone that doesn't know, you're a 3-time Olympic marathon runner in 2000, 04 and 08.
Yep.
That's correct. Very good. And you've such a big deal that you've got a troop loop, a track around the Barwon River named after you. How big's that?
It was a wonderful honour that Councillor Bruce Harwood had put forward through to the city, and they voted unanimously for it to be known as that. So lots of people run around it, and because I've lived in the US for such a long time, I haven't really understood the impact. But now that I'm back quite regularly, people that now draw the parallels of Lee Troop and Troop Loop, you know, they're quite excited to actually A, know that I'm still alive, but then B, actually meet the person who it's named after.
So when did that actually come about?
I'm going to go back to around about probably 2011, 2012, sometime around then. And it was Councillor Bruce Harwood's idea, and he'd asked if I would be interested, and of course I said yes. I've spent endless hours and miles running around the Barwon River. So, yeah, we go down there. I take my kids down there to go for a run, so it's weird that Lee Troop's running on the Troop Loop, but yeah, a wonderful honour.
Yeah, and on a day like this, beautiful day, there'll be heaps on the Troop Loop today, wouldn't there?
Correct.
I want to go straight into, I guess, your running journey and how you've gotten to what you've achieved, really. I love going through people's, I guess, childhood and how they built up to what they, I guess, achieved. So starting with you, with your childhood life, what brought you to running? How'd you start, I guess?
So there's two pathways. The first one was my father wanted to start running, and that came on the back that there was a big push back in the 80s. It was called the Life Be In It program. So it was big norm, sitting on a chair, drinking a beer, burping, eating bad foods. Yep. And so my father was a drinker and a smoker, and he decided he wanted to try and get healthy and went on a diet and started running. And coincidentally, it was about the time that Robert De Castella was making a name for himself in the marathon world. And then I went to Whittington Primary School, and my teacher, Jenny O'Markin, she created this program through Life Be In It as well, where for every kilometre that you ran, you basically got a sketch, an outline, and I'd go home and colour it in and put it into a book. So, and I still have it, believe it or not. And I would run before school and lunchtime and after school, and people would count my laps. So I was trying to accumulate as many of these sketches as I could to colour in. And as I said, then with my father, we would run around the Whittington estate, which was 3 kilometres around, and he would work a long, hard day, and 4:30, 5 o'clock, he and my other younger brother would head out and run 3 kilometres with him most nights of the week.
And what did you like most about it as a kid?
I think firstly, it was the opportunity to run with my dad when he would be in a happy place. Dad was always quite moody when we were younger, just because he worked so hard. He worked at the ingot mill, and then he had jobs where, you know, he had his own sprinkler system, and he was a hard labourer. But you got an opportunity to run where it was something that we all enjoyed. I also played football and cricket, so I played team sports. And the thing that I kept coming back to was that I just loved the individualistic aspect of running. So everything you put in was a result of the reward, so to speak. Whereas with football and cricket, I was always such a high achiever that if people weren't training to the level that I had or had the same desire to be successful in it, I'd always become quite frustrated with it. AFL football, which back then it was VFL football, and playing cricket for Australia and being a bowler like Dennis Lilly were still dreams, but somehow just because they were team sports, and I got to a point where I felt like that I wasn't getting the return from other teammates, I just fell into running, and I enjoyed running a lot more.
What were the biggest influences with you growing up? Did you have any idols or anyone you looked up to?
Well, definitely Robert De Castella. He was a household name. And then after Robert De Castella was Steve Moneghetti. So the fact that I loved running, and there were 2 successful marathon runners, it was pretty easy to have them as my role models. And then as I got older and, you know, started to become successful, those 2 still were role models, but they became mentors and became friends. And then you also probably look at things a little bit differently through a lens when you start to look at role models with people like Nelson Mandela as an example. And I got to touch him in 96 when we were at the World Cross Country Championships running. And, you sort of think to yourself, wow, here's this icon that everyone around the world knows, and through the sport of running I've actually got to see him.
So how did you can you talk about that story, about how you got to do that?
So 96, the World Cross Country Championships were in a place called Stellenbosch outside of Cape Town, and we got bussed out to this course, and it was out by a winery, and we had all these tents that were all set up, and they were for each country, and we just heard this singing and chanting, and everyone just sort of started running. And I remember there was like Khalid Scar, and there was Haile Gebrselassie, there was like all these people. Anyway, I ran over to see what the fuss was, and it was the great man himself, Nelson Mandela, with everyone around him. And it wasn't like there was security and everything, just you could just touch him. Like he was just there. I was blown away that I could be that close to, as I said, one of the greatest and most inspirational people, the world's come to know. So we all went back, and again, we all started talking about the athletes, because this was my first senior World Cross Country Championship. And it just seemed to be that despite the fact that there was these legends of athletes, that Nelson Mandela was by far the best experience for all of us.
So what was he doing there? Do you know?
Yeah, so he was the leader of the country.
Yeah.
And so he was there as a major event to go in and take a look at, obviously, the operational side of things and how the event is. It would be no different than if we had like the Olympics and, our Prime Minister was there.
Yeah.
So as a leader of, obviously, South Africa, he was there to take a look at it. And the World Cross Country Championships are a major championship. Yeah. So, but again, I pinched myself that, he was that close and walked amongst us.
And no security, as you mentioned too.
Well, there was probably security, but it was very lax.
Yeah.
And like I said, just normally, they would have like people, from the military or the police, and there probably were undercover people, but it wasn't done with any alarm. It was just, as I said, him walking, and he had an entourage of people all singing, and it was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. When you run, obviously, what would be the key or the most key things that you need to achieve, or I guess need to be successful? Like we talk about discipline, I guess, with long distance running. What other ones would come to mind that you need to achieve a good, successful run?
Oh, you sort of open Pandora's box there, because there isn't one thing.
Yeah.
You obviously need to train, and you have to be able to handle the high volume of training, which means that you can't be injured all the time. You also have to be able to enjoy running. If you're not enjoying it, then it becomes quite arduous and a lot more draining on your body. You also have to be emotionally stable, because it does bring the greatest of highs and the lowest of lows. And you have to realize that with running, that there's no one pathway. There's just multiple pathways to get there, and finding the right way for yourself. So that takes time, and then that leads to patience. But then there's the work ethic, right? There's the dedication and the commitment to be able to do it. There's also, unfortunately, the sacrifice that you need to make, and that comes at the cost of potentially people's weddings, seeing people have weddings of the baby's head, because you're traveling, you're racing, and so your social life ends up becoming quite impacted upon, and it can at times become quite lonely. Talk about the loneliness of the long distance runner, but if you have all those other things in line, it certainly makes the pursuit of what you're striving for easier.
What was your training regime?
Mine varied a bit. Some of the best running I did was when I trained with Steve Monaghetti in Ballarat. We trained twice a day, every day, roughly 180 to 200 kilometres a week. 3 quality sessions that didn't go over 6 to 8 kilometres, but a lot of volume running. And then I started mixing things up a little bit, trying to look for that secret sauce to try and break Deke's record. So I trained a lot with the Africans and started training like them and running 3 times a day. And then I started doing the Japanese volume of training. So I was doing 240 to 250 kilometers a day. So I've had a good cross section. And then I retired from running and fell into coaching. And so living in the US, I've been able to draw on the knowledge of a lot of fantastic coaches over there to sort of help open the doors a little bit more with coaching. And what I've found that, again, I've said before, there's not really one way, but it's really trying to find the right way based on the athlete's personality. It's very hard for an athlete to change their personality, so you need to try and find the training that best suits them. Some are super, super serious, and you need to work out how you can dial it back a little bit to give them balance. And then you have others that probably don't take it as serious as enough, and you have to then find a way to get them more dedicated and committed to their craft if they legitimately want to be successful with what they do.
Yep. And you mentioned that like different countries have different I guess ways of training. Is that correct?
Yep.
And so can you go over, I guess, different countries that you're aware of in terms of what they do compared to others?
Yep. So, I mean, if you look at the Kenyans, it's like a lot of volume, a lot of training. Their runs are easy. That's how they start out before they wind it up and start going really, really hard. And we do live in a world now where everything's accessible via the internet, so you can see how athletes around the world change. Yeah. The Ethiopians, big grip workouts, a lot of plyos involved with their workout. Then you've got the Australian way of training, which has varied a little bit since, Mona and myself. And I think the blurred lines are a little bit now that athletes can train harder because they've actually got equipment that allow them to do that. So back in our day, we had minimalist shoes. So, you were doing high miles. It was a lot of physical therapy and massage and trying to, stay healthy. But now everyone's got carbon plated shoes, which means their body isn't taking the brunt of that heavy, hard training. And they can obviously train harder and they can do longer, but then they can also recover better. So we're starting to see just training evolve again now based on what people have as far as running aids. I
was going to ask about your opinion on the carbon plate. Where do you stand with that?
It's probably not a good idea to ask an old guy like me. I speak for the majority where they called the shoe the 4% for a reason, and it added 3 to 4 minutes of improvement for a lot of the runners at the top end, and that really muddies the waters. And what I will say is that I was fortunate to break Ron Clark's Australian 5K record, and he did run that on cinders, despite the fact that I ran mine on a Mondo track. But the improvement in and around the upgrades to tracks was nothing as astronomical as what we saw with shoes. And, you look at Robert De Castella's Australian record that stood for such a long time, and I think we've now got 4 or 5 that are under that in a small period of time. And, there's definitely impacts that it's had. I no longer look at times when it comes to racing, but I certainly look at places. So if everyone's wearing the shoes and you've got 100 people in a race, all things are even.
Yep.
So it is about place. But I certainly don't really take much weight anymore when it comes to times because everybody's running fast. Like 2:10's not even a big deal anymore. In the US, they don't even really worry about the 4-minute mile. The 4-minute mile was such the benchmark. But now with the bank tracks and the springs in the track and then the spikes, everyone's running under 4 minutes. So, I mean, one of the greatest global agencies that there are, which is Track and Field News, they've even said we're no longer rating and grading the top athletes based on that.
Do you reckon it's kind of dampened, I guess, the beauty of running? Because, like, if you take back to, I guess, your era, you didn't have that kind of access, and you look to the runners that, like back in your day, where if you had access to the carbon plate, you would be running a lot quicker as well. Like, do you think it's kind of dampened? There's
running? 2 ways to answer that. The first way is running's beautiful no matter what.
Yeah.
The people that are involved in running today don't know any different, right? Like in my time, I didn't know any different with Derek Clayton and with Ron Clark. Like you knew. Yeah. We also had major appreciation and respect. It's a lot different these days because everyone's doing it. And if anyone is critical about it, they're always seen as being jealous or, upset. Yeah. And that's not the way at all. Like I said, I really value those that run at that top level. But I feel like now that things are just so distorted that, I mean, what is 207 anymore? Like when everyone's running under that. Everything has moved really quickly, which is probably why we see less interest at the top end, and we're seeing way more interest now back with community and recreational running, where races all over the world are selling out, and primarily because there probably is that huge gap now between what was realistic and reality versus now what's not. So, it's, as I said, for me, I try to stay away from it. It's a tough one to answer without people judging to conclusion. So I'm only speaking in the facts, and they are that Nike called it the 4% for a reason. There is a 3 to 4 minute improvement with people that do wear the shoes. And granted, there are some that aren't biomechanically sound, so the shoes don't work. But I've also seen people that aren't biomechanically sound get that added advantage by wearing the shoes. But we've also seen major updates in nutrition, sleep and recovery, also medical. So there's a lot of things that have changed, but the shoes have been the biggest advantage that runners today have received.
Yep. And then the carbon plate as well. Do you, with the kind of design that it is, do they tend to get more injuries with a carbon plate, or it's a bit like, because with the normal shoe, am I right in saying that it kind of trains your muscle to a certain area or whatever, and then with a carbon plate, it kind of dysfunctions that in a way?
For some people, yes, but for a lot, no. Like they recover quicker. Like they've got, it's basically a spring, so they're bouncing, and so the shoe is absorbing. Like you've got that 40 mil drop, so it's absorbing the impact, and that's less impact on the ankle, the knee, the hips, and everything that aligns. Whereas back in the day, you wore a much thinner shoe, you hit the ground a lot harder, and you would have, that ripple effect of ankle, knee, hip, back, sacroiliac joint issues. But with the shoes, as I said today, they're helping people recover. They're helping people train more, which, is a good thing. I guess probably physical therapists and massage therapists are the ones that might be impacted a little bit differently now with not having as many elite athletes to service. But like all things, it takes time. So if someone was going from couch to 5K, you wouldn't have them just step out there and run, right? There are small steps to gradually build them up, become accustomed to running. And that's the same with footwear. Like you wouldn't just put them on and go out and run in them. They would take a little bit of time to adjust. And everyone's running form's different as well. So trying to adjust and accommodate would take a difference in time for different people.
So carbon plate wouldn't work with everyone?
Not everyone, no, but I would say that for those that need it, it does. And for some people, it's also the added psychological benefit, right? So it's like these shoes must work. They get on there and people are looking for those added advantages, and they'll read all the, the testimonials. And so for them in their head, they're like, they've got to have it. But we've also seen such a seismic change now with all the brands. All the brands have carbon plated shoes. I mean, I remember Ultra, they were known as the zero drop shoes. Well, now they've got carbon plated shoes. Hoka, everyone laughed when they first come out because they look like a clown shoe, but now everyone's got the extra foam that's in it. Things have changed drastically now when it comes to footwear, and all brands seem to be on equal footing. Hoka, On, and Adidas are just as competitive as Nike, and if anything, probably Nike's dropped in that performance wear because the other brands have been able to get up to their level and probably improve that product a bit more. You
mentioned that like Hoka, they were a clown shoe, and then now they're really popular. What makes them all of a sudden people want them?
Well, it's performance driven. So, if you saw one of the famous athletes in the world wearing the shoes and they're talking about improvement, you would want them. And Nike's marketing of that 4% was what people wanted. They were just like, oh, they're going to make me faster. Without even wearing them, they just knew that if they got them, that was going to improve their performance 4%. And so people bought into that. But then the other brands obviously were so far behind, they had to try and catch up to get to them. And as I said, now it's accessible for everybody. I've never worn them, and I'm now old school that I don't want to. I still wear just a very basic structured shoe because that works for me, and I don't run hardly at all anymore. Like it's probably 3 times a week and 30 minutes for those runs. So I don't need to buy, a $300 or $400 pair of shoes.
Going back to your journey now, and was the Olympics always the dream?
I think that's every runner's dream, yep.
And when was that time where you realised you could get there?
Probably at 96 when I'd come back home from the US, December 94. I'd moved to Ballarat to train with Steve Moneghetti. I thought if I was going to make it to the Olympic Games, I needed to train with the best and learn from the best. And I didn't make 96, but I was up every morning watching the Atlanta Olympic Games and knowing the level that Steve trained at and knowing that I could get to that level, I'd made a pact that I would do everything I could to make the Olympics in 4 years' time. So that was definitely the mind shift of knowing that I could make the Olympics. I mean, obviously you've got to stay healthy and you've got to get there, but it wasn't like, you know, I'd hope one day to it or I'm an aspiring Olympian. It was a significant mind shift of I now want to train to be an Olympian.
What was the process like to get into 2000?
So we had to run the qualifying standard, which was 2:16, I think, at that time, or 2:14. I'd already ran the London Marathon a year earlier and ran 2:11. That was my first marathon. So I already had the time. They pre-selected Steve Moneghetti based on his performances at major championships, which then left 2 spots open. And we were having a trial event on the actual course that the Olympics were going to be on in October, and this was in April. I was up at Falls Creek training 99, 2000, and I'd had a great year in 99. I'd broken Clarkie's 5K record. I'd ran 7:41 for 3K. I debuted at London Marathon and ran 2:11. I'd run a 61 flat half marathon in Japan, in Tokyo, and finished second. So I was like extremely confident, but I basically overdid my training. I started training 3 times a day, and I ended up getting a stress fracture in my pelvis. And so I had to come home from the altitude training. And once it was diagnosed, I was told it was going to be 8 weeks out. And then I would have basically 6-7 weeks to get onto the start line of the marathon. So it was an extremely nerve-wracking period for me. There was a guy from England called Richard Narurka who was living with me, and he was injured at the time, and he was just a cross-training animal. And so I just tagged along with him with the cross-training and then got to the trials in April. And I finished 5th, which was great off 6 or 7 weeks training. The athlete that won the trial was Rod de Hayden, and he already had the time. So if you won the trial, you were automatically in if you had the time. And then the guy that was second and third didn't have the time. Guy that was 4th, I think, was from New Zealand, and then it was me. And because I had the time, I then got selected.
Right, and then obviously the emotions. Did are you a calm man when you got selected, or what was your reaction when you realised running in Sydney?
It was just great. Now I've got to train harder.
Yeah.
And so basically, once I got selected, it was just like, you know, now put in the training and stay healthy and focus on that. So I didn't really get caught up in the emotion.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the old of, you know, you have to run the time, then you've got to get selected, and then you've got to get to the start line. So for me, I had 2 out of the 3 things I needed.
Still needed to get to the start line.
Yeah.
The Olympic Village is something that I'm fascinated about with the Olympics. What was 2000 like?
It was great. Like, we were way out the back, so we had like these sort of bungalow shed things that were set up, so we weren't in any of the apartments. We were on the last day, so I wasn't around for the first week, 10 days. We were in Cronulla training down there, trying to stay away from the hype of everything. Now, I'd never been to the Olympics before, so I sort of leaned on Steve Moneghetti because he'd previously been to 3. And yeah, then we went into the village, but by the time we got in, most sports had finished, so most people were in party mode. So it was a little distracting in trying to stay focused on what the job at hand was, despite the fact that people were in party mode. So you'd be going in to have breakfast and people were coming in from the night out that they'd had. And, you know, it was a little, as I said, distracting, but that's what comes with the Olympic Games.
Yeah. Did you got sleep, though, over the Olympics, or was that kind of a challenge as well?
It was so for us, the marathon was at 4:00 on the 1st.
Yeah.
And, you know, so like you sort of got up, and as I said, we are on the very last day, which is a very special occasion to be able to be a traditional event that closes the Olympic Games. But by that stage, there's hardly no one left with events. So when I went down there to have breakfast, as I said, people were coming in and wanting to talk, and I just had to try and stay really focused on the marathon that was going to be that afternoon. So yeah, look, it was tough, and particularly because I'd never been to an Olympic, so I'd never seen any of this. And you see all these elite athletes and from all different sports, and it's I was sort of awestruck to be quite honest. But in no way, shape or form affected my performance. It was just an adjustment that, you can't prepare until you're actually there and you see it.
Yeah. So obviously you hadn't been before. So were there anything that you were expecting to see from the Olympics? Anything that surprised you while you were at the Olympics?
No, I think the thing that helped me was that it was in Sydney. So it was like, I've been to Sydney a million times.
Yeah.
I've raced in Sydney. Whereas I think, and that probably might have been to my detriment, that I was probably blasé in regards to that it was only in Sydney, it wasn't a big deal. Had it been in a foreign country, it would have been a lot different because, you have to gain access into the village. You've got to be in the village, like there are restrictions to where you can and you can't go. I think that might have changed my concept a little bit because I was just so driven of like, it's just another race in Sydney, just focus on it. Don't get caught up in the hype. So, it was just, had it been somewhere else, I think the mind shift would have been different and there would have been a lot more things I wouldn't have known. Yeah. Whereas being in Sydney, I was way more relaxed because it was in my country. So the language, everyone speaks English. Everyone, like all the volunteers, are extremely welcoming and friendly. And I knew where we were going because we'd already had a tour of the Olympic Village, months prior to that. So, I wasn't really expecting anything, but I think I also hadn't hyped it up to have expectations on things.
Yep. Running's so like tactical. So for a marathon, when you're walking into Sydney, or like, do you have a plan in mind before the race and you try and stick to that? Like what was the plan that you had?
So my goal was to finish in the top 10
Yep.
and I felt that I could achieve that and I felt that I was super fit. The plan was to be in the lead pack. I always strive well on not really breaking the race down into certain plans, but to be in the pack and focus on what was going on. And, we were in North Sydney for the race start and I was pretty relaxed and, looking forward to a big event. And we took off and we went over the Sydney Harbour Bridge and I sort of was back just sort of looking to see where all the key athletes were at the time, and then decided to sort of work my way through so that by 5K I was sort of sitting where I needed to sit. I went through halfway in the lead pack. I believe there was 11 of us and I was recorded as fourth going across the mat, and so I was having a day out and really enjoying the atmosphere of the day. So I was enjoying the atmosphere of everything that was going on in the race. And then at about 23 kilometres, we ran down off Oxford Street before we had to head up the Glebe Island Bridge, the Anzac Bridge. And as I was running down, I was overstriding and I just felt this slight pop and I didn't quite know what it was. But as we then leaned to get up into the hill, I was like, it's like a stitch. And I was like, oh, this is not great timing. And as we were coming up over the bridge, I could feel the headwind. And so I dropped off the lead pack. And as we kept going, then all of a sudden a few runners sort of caught up and I tried to tack in and I couldn't. I just felt like this stitch, and stitches come and go. And as we sort of went down the other side, I tried to open up and I couldn't. And as the race went on, I started to fatigue more. The stitch felt worse. I got to 34 kilometres and I started vomiting blood. And anyway, I made it into the stadium and we had to finish within 2.5 hours. Otherwise, you would have to finish on the warm-up track because they were going to do the closing ceremony. So I always had that in my mind. And we also have a rule of thumb when you wear the Australian uniform that if you're going to DNF, you have to take the singlet off and leave it on the side of the road. You're not worthy of wearing it. You finish the race no matter the result. So I was really conscientious of all these things, and I ran into the stadium and I sort of don't really remember much in the stadium, but I remember going to walk out because I was just emotionally distraught. I didn't know what had happened. And as I said, at that stage, I thought it was still a stitch. And then there's the media, but Steve Monaghetti and Rod DeHiding were waiting for me. So we always wait for all runners to cross the line because we know they're not going to pull out. Then I had to sort of navigate through the media, and there was no answers to the questions that were being asked because I didn't know what had happened. And then I was really distraught and I wanted to get away from everything. I felt claustrophobic, and there was a door and I pushed open the door just to get away, and it got me outside the stadium. And I got outside the stadium and I was like, I can't get back in.
Oh no.
And of course the closing ceremony's starting and I'm knocking and I couldn't. And so anyway, luckily the village was only a kilometre or so from the stadium. And I walked back there with just my singlet, shorts, shoes. I was emotional. I hadn't even got my bag from the recovery area. And when I got to the village, they wouldn't let me in because I didn't have my accreditation, because my accreditation was with my uniform. I'm crying. But anyway, one of the security guys go, look, we'll walk you to your room, and if you can produce ID to prove who you are, you can go in. So I walked down there and showed him my ID, and then I got to stay in. And I had no answers. I didn't know what was going on. And we found out a few weeks later that I'd actually torn my rectus abdominis, which came as a result that I had the stress fracture at the start of the year, and I fast-tracked to get to the start line of the trials marathon. I qualified, but then because I had qualified, I didn't then take the time to let my body recover from the stress fracture and all the training that I'd done in that short period of time. I was like, I've made the Olympics, it's business now, let's get into training. And unfortunately, I was overcompensating, and because I didn't allow my body to recover, I took that into the marathon, and it was just a simple thing of overstriding down the hill that my rectus abdominis popped as a result of overcompensating for the previous stress fracture I'd had. So
that's such a long process, injuries, and how they can impact a race long down the track.
Yep.
How do you manage that? So, for instance, if you, with your stress fracture, if you didn't have the Olympics in 7 months' time, would you have been still in that recovery for...
I would have taken the time to recover adequately, and then I would have slowly and gradually built up to my training and would have picked a marathon at the end of the year. But I had to run the trials to make the team, and then I'd made the team to make the Olympics. So I was trying to get exemption from the trials based on having the injury and my performance at London in 99, and then also breaking Clarkie's record. We put everything in, but they'd already pre-selected Steve Monaghetti, so they weren't going to pre-select me. And so I had to prove my worth. And yeah, I mean, it would have been great to have been given the exemption to fully recover, but the selection criteria was the selection criteria, and I had to do it.
So after Sydney, how long did it take for you? Obviously, it's a hard situation that you were put in. How long did it take before you could kind of emotionally get back to normal?
That's a really good question. I think the disappointment of the Olympics hung around with me. For those that followed my career, I was very honest in everything. So if I was going to do a race, I would critique it extremely well and honestly, and sometimes that comes with a price, right? So I was open that I wanted to be in the top 10 of the Olympic Games. I felt that being a home Olympics and being someone on the up, that I had nothing to lose and I would run well. And then of course I finished 66th. I've never watched the Olympic Games, but it was 66, and I know it was under 2:30. It was 2:29 something, and I only know that because we had to finish the race in 2 hours and 30 minutes. But I was out one night in Geelong at the Eureka, and normally after a race, I would have a marathon race. I'd usually have 2 or 3 weeks of downtime, and that would mean going out, partying, just doing what you do with your friends. And yeah, we were out at the Eureka one night, and some guy just turned around and asked me how it felt to let my country down. And
oh my God.
I was like, wow, I've just come out to have a beer. And so I didn't really handle that well, and sort of realize that when you do open your mouth, you become a target. So there was the physical side, then there's the emotional side. And the emotional side I didn't let go of for probably the rest of my career. So it was a motivating factor for me and drove me with everything that I did, and probably drove me at times too hard. But it was one of those things that through the embarrassment of that performance, that I wanted to make sure that every Olympics I went to, I trained harder than I'd previously trained for that, which again came at a price. And I don't think having a coach or a mentor could have changed that aggression or that mental psyche that I was in, just because that's just how I was. I was always referred to as a sprinter in a distance guy's body. It was just always on. So yeah, it took a while. I went to Rotterdam in April of 2001, and I ended up finishing 5th and ran 2:10. So that helped jumpstart me back in again to getting on with business. But as far as the disappointment of Sydney, that hung with me for a very long time.
So when you, obviously you need to bounce back, and what's the most important thing to I guess, recover emotionally and getting back to normal? Because obviously that was a tricky time for you. How'd you get through that?
Well, I just said I didn't get over Sydney for many years. I carried that through with me, like even after I retired.
Did it play?
Being able to get back into running helped.
Yeah.
So, because that was my job. Being able to do extremely hard workouts with Mona, like we would always push each other in training workouts and we'd get the best out of each other. So I think being able to get back to work definitely helped. But there was always this driving force with, the next 2 Olympics that I went to, that it was more than just the Olympics. It was to atone for what happened in Sydney, which it never came. So it's one of those ones that you eventually try to find peace and calmness. And I probably found that in my coaching of elite athletes in the US, that I could sort of slowly start to let it go and focus more on the psychological side of coaching than just the physical side.
But in Athens was your best performing Olympics. So after 2000, would you agree? Was that your best? Were you happy with that?
It was my best performance, but it wasn't a great race.
Right. Okay.
I had gone into the Olympics training extremely hard. I was doing those 240k weeks. So my easiest day was 10 miles in the morning or 16 kilometers in the morning and then 16 kilometers at night. I probably went to Athens cooked. So and Steve Monaghetti says this, he could just tell, like he come to some of my workouts and my workouts were just out of this world. And I probably got on the plane and it was probably more relief that I could actually not train so hard now and get ready for the race. And at Athens, I felt like a car that had 5 gears, but only 4 were working on that day. And it started very early on. Always at the front, there's a lot of surging early on. And with the first few surges that happened, I couldn't respond quickly. My leg turnover wasn't coming as fast. I was lagging. And then anyway, there was a significant surge, I think probably 10 miles, and I couldn't go with it. But I was able to run that pace all the way through. I was just strong all the way through without being energetic or electric at any point. So, I finished the race and, I felt like I could have gone faster and harder, but I couldn't. That was as fast and as hard as I could go. So I do think that, again, I talked about the Sydney experience. I put so much into Athens that it wasn't just about the training. It was atonement for what happened at Sydney. And I made every training workout matter. I made everything that I did in my behavior matter. That included food and treatment. And I even had a little thing on my bathroom mirror that had the Panathinaike Stadium. And I had a little sticky thing that had 1,000 days. And I was just peeling those off every day to get to that point. Oh, sorry, I tell a lie. It was 364 days. I did it a year out. But I hadn't missed a day in training. I'd had over 1,000 days accumulated in training. And again, I feel like I put so much pressure on myself, and I went into the race with not the purity and the beautiful part of running, which is like that's the celebration part, right? Like you've done all this training, you get there, you celebrate it. But for me, it was just business. I was just so dialed in that I wasn't relaxed enough, and I paid the price.
Did you enjoy the training, or did you have to learn to enjoy it?
There were days I definitely found harder than the others. But I never missed training. Like I said, I trained 1,000 days, and I was one of those guys that if I was going to be training at 8 o'clock, it was 8 o'clock. Like I wouldn't then go, no, I'm a bit tired, I'll sleep in and do it at 9:30. Like I stuck to that at 8 and 5. I also think the change in direction of my training. So when I was training with Mona, everything was just a lot more relaxed, and we trained, and the workouts weren't grinding. Like we'd push each other, but they weren't long, hard grinding workouts. When I moved back to Geelong, and I obviously had to be accountable to myself. I was doing my training. I had to be at the workouts. I didn't have someone meeting me or a coach telling me what to do. So, and that is another layer of, professionalism that you have when you're self-coached. And I just think everything was just business. And so it wasn't about how I felt. Like, the old saying is that, you you wake up tired, you go to bed super tired. You're just always tired as a runner. But it probably would have helped having someone oversee everything that I was doing and micromanage a few things just to get me to pull the reins back a little bit. And I think that's just been one of the skills that I've brought to coaching elite athletes is, and I tell them, I'm like, there isn't anything that you will think about and there isn't anything that you're going to do that I haven't done. I've made all the mistakes that there are, but I've made them and I've learnt, right? It's trial and error. But where I try to find the right balance for the athletes is in the psychological side and taking away the pressure they build on them and trying to keep it low key and fun. And I think that's where things change for me because I was sponsored by Nike. So you're always like, there's always pressure to perform. Like your contract has performance bonuses, and if you don't, there's a reduction in your contract. Yeah. So, and that was my livelihood. So I would travel to races. I'm getting an appearance fee. I'm racing for prize money. So, you have to perform. Otherwise, you would then have to be like everyone else and actually have a job.
Yes.
So, I mean, I had a job, but I had a much more enjoyable job than most others. So for me, the elevation of professionalism and responsibility was pretty significant.
So there was pressure, obviously, to earn a living, I guess, through running. How do you handle the pressure?
Oh, no, that comes with the territory.
Yeah.
So there are probably people that have had that pressure and they've melted.
Yeah.
But for me, it just came with the territory. So there was nothing too big, too great. And I've said this a million times. The only pressure there was the pressure I was putting on myself. And that pressure was far greater than anything else.
Yeah. How do you make training fun? Like because you're a coach now and you go through all these different scenarios and stuff, how would you try and make training as fun as possible?
So a lot of it's reading the athlete and the body language. So if someone's feeling flat and tired, I can just change the workout on the spot. I can reduce the length of the run so that they're not going to have to grind their way through something. The disappointment of a race, let's go and have a beer. Like, let's just get over it, vent for 24 hours, but then come Monday, we're back to work.
Yeah.
When an athlete has success, like, let's celebrate it. But again, Monday we come to work, we forget about it, we close the book. When they're injured, being there at their cross-training workouts, so when they're doing their pool running, their cycling and things like that, being encouraging because it can be a dark time for a lot of athletes. And I lost an athlete to suicide. So it's something that doesn't leave you, and you can look for signs and sometimes there aren't signs. But as a coach, you want to be able to say that in your heart that you did everything that you could. And with the athlete that did pass away, I did do everything that I could. So, I take comfort in that. I don't take comfort in him passing away, but I've really tried to mirror a lot of things that I should have done as an athlete that I give to the athletes. And I find that it's not about the training, it's about the balance of everything. And I feel like for young people, there's more pressure these days than there probably was back in my day. So how do we balance all of that out? So making sure that they've got a good positive group around them. So people that are uplifting rather than down-putting, making sure that their work environment is also balanced, that, their employer knows the impact of what they're going through and what they're striving for, so that they can also be encouraging within that journey, because you get one chance. And if you don't make it, it's all over. So I think trying to balance all those things out are critically important.
Yeah. What did bring you to coaching?
I fell into it. I got asked to coach, and I didn't want to coach because I coach myself, and I have only had one or two coaches, and I know how draining it can be. But I took on one athlete, then I took on another, and then another, and then before you knew it, I had a group of 30 people. And I've coached 2 Olympians, and I've coached multiple national champions, but I've also coached someone that ran a 7-hour marathon. So I ended up just having like a community recreation group, and then a sub-elite group and an elite group. I found coaching after John passed away a lot harder, because then you overthought more, like, how are they thinking? What do they need? What are their needs and wants? What do I need to do as a coach? And so I always felt like I was walking on eggshells with my athletes. And then you got the flip side, that there are also a lot of self-entitled individuals these days. And, the social media side of things I don't like, and everything's a me, and not a we. And so I find that hard being a blue collar person, because everyone in your group is responsible for your performance. You know, that's your partner, that's your family, that's your friends, like it's your coach, it's your physical therapist. And I've always been about uplifting everyone around me and making them feel valued as a person in my support network. But I feel like some athletes these days, because they are about the me, they're oblivious to the we. And so if it's a bad performance, it's the coach's fault. If it's a great performance, it's me. And you see that written in their social feeds. And I'm always like, hey, like, we live by the sword, we die by the sword. You know, it doesn't cost you anything to thank your coach. It doesn't cost you anything to thank your family or the people that have trained with you to help you get to where you need. So one of the things that I've really enjoyed about not coaching anymore is it's allowed me to actually get my own sanity back, because I started to get to the point where I just don't enjoy the sport. You know, I love the recreational side because they're the everyday people, right? They're the ones that have families. They're the ones that are trying to grind out 60-hour weeks and fit the balance of just 2 or 3 runs in because it's an outlet for them. They're about losing weight. They're about raising money for charity. They're about breaking 4 hours or running their first marathon. Like, there's so much joy that comes with that. But I just found that on the elite side of things and on the sub-elite side, and this is not everyone, but there were just some that just eventually grind you to the ground, where you start to question everything. You start to question your own coaching and what you do, and, you know, there's no, like, love, no respect. So, yeah, taking the break that I've taken has certainly reinvigorated me a little bit, where, you know, I won't say I'll never get into coaching, but, you know, maybe one day there may be that opportunity. And if I do, it would be more of that recreational community side of things, because that's where I feel the most energy for me comes in.
So do you build there's culture in running, I'm assuming, like there is culture in footy and that, and you're just saying how important it is. That is. Let's talk about your PB. This is rapid, 2:09:49, is that correct?
Correct, yep.
Where was that?
That was at Lake Biwa Marathon in 2003.
So that is the definition of a perfect race for you, or did it not go fully to plan?
No, I should have ran faster.
Yeah.
I went through 30K in an hour 30 high. I was on 2:07 pace, and then I got to about 34, 35 kilometres, and then I just started to tire. And so I ended up running 2:09:49. And then that's what changed my training, because I was like, I need to train harder. I need to grind in more workouts so that will happen in my races. I would say the nearly perfect race came a year later at London. I ran 2:09:58. And I was on 2:06 pace all the way up to about 34, 35K. It was a horrible day. It was windy. It was raining. There was a surge at 21K, and I was almost going to go with it. And I decided, no, there's Stefan Baldini, who went on to win the Olympics, Antonio Pinto. There was a big group of athletes. I was like, it's probably a bit too early. Anyway, I was with Stefan Baldini at 34, 35K. We went... At that stage, you used to run in front of the Tower Hotel and then under the Tower Bridge. And it was cobblestoned. And I sort of lost... It might have only been 10 or 15 metres on Baldini. Baldini is a big guy. And then we came off a ramp onto the Thames, and it was windy. And that 10 or 15 metres then became 30, 45. I couldn't get onto him, and I needed that buffer. I was only 56 kilos and at 5'9", 5'10", wiry, right? So I just couldn't quite get on. So I lost 2 minutes just in that point. So I ended up still breaking 2:10, but everyone dropped 2 minutes in that race. Yeah. So I wasn't the only one at that point. So I think Baldini was 2:08. And I ended up being 2:09, and yet we were all on 2:06 pace, you know, going through 30K. Like I was an hour 30 and 4 seconds, right, which is right on the nose.
Yeah, wow.
And then again, I was frustrated because I was like, that happened a year ago, and I decided I was going to train harder, and then I've trained harder, and then the same things happened. And then I tried to change my training again. And then that was leading into the Olympics. And that's where I think I cooked myself, because I ran an outstanding race. The weather just didn't comply, but to run 2:09 on that day at London, be in the top 10 of a world major, I didn't appreciate it and take the good from it. It was just the negative of falling apart. And so I didn't really take a break. I then just grinded through to Athens, and that's where I feel like I probably overdid it by a month I had been on such a streak of not missing any days. So yeah, I feel like that race at London was a better executed race than I did at Lake Biwa. They were both 2:09.
Yeah.
Both I trained differently for, but both got a great result.
And you said most people lost 2 minutes. Was that on the cobblestone area?
No, it was just the weather.
Yeah.
So yeah, you basically, when you came out onto the Thames, it was a headwind all the way up to Big Ben, and everyone was struggling at that point, because obviously it's at the latter part of the race, so you're fatigued and tired. And yeah, just weather was more that.
Is it easy to roll your ankle on cobblestone? Like, that seems like a dangerous kind of path.
I'm a cross-country runner, so I'm used to rolled ankles. But no, they had carpet out there, but it was just the unevenness.
Yeah.
Like, I ran the World Championships in 2003 at Paris in the World Champs, and you went up the Champs-Élysées. It was the same thing. It's a cobblestone path, and so it's a little uneven, but it's not rocky.
Yeah. Is rocky would be the hardest terrain to run on?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yep. You've been open about like the mental toll and stuff in running. How do you handle when you're like dropping 2 minutes, or like you're on track and then you start to drop off? How do you mentally stay in the game knowing that you're kind of struggling? How do you just keep pushing forward?
Well, because you go out to win, and then that win becomes top 3, then that top 3 becomes top 5, then that top 5 becomes top 10. The time that you run determines the bonus money you're going to get from the race organizer. It also determines the bonus money you're going to get from your sponsor.
Yep.
Your placing determines your prize money. So there is always a goal. It's not like you just give up and go, I'm having a bad day, I'm done. There's always a goal to keep striving to the very, very end. And everyone that's followed my career knows that every race I've done, I've always given as much as I can. I've never crossed a finish line, going, I could have ran faster, I could have ran harder. Like, I'm always spent. And that's what I loved about running in the day for me, was the purity of pushing your body as hard as you can, knowing that you're going to break down, knowing that, it's going to then be a question of mental strength and will, which is what I loved about the marathon. And that's what I don't see today.
Yes.
Right? Because everyone's able to close out fast. Everyone's bouncing around. And now people are running like 5 or 6 marathons a year because they recover and they can do the training. And I don't see the grit. I don't see the people grinding the teeth, like really just and clenching the fist, driving with the last ounce of energy that they've got to finish the marathon. They're all bouncing across the line. They're all happy, they're jovial, and then they go to the next race. So that's the one thing I miss about the marathon when I talk about it in its pure sense. That to me is purity.
And was that something you had naturally? Because you talk about like the grit, how it's like how natural you had it, like you were pushing yourself all the time, and not everyone does that. So that's something naturally you had? Or was it something you were taught?
I think it's something that I had. Like, I'm a Whittington kid. I had a tough upbringing. So you have that grit. But I trained with Mona, and I got to see how deep in the well he could go. And you've got to see it, then you've got to try it. And the chances are the first few times it doesn't go well. Like, I had a few major blow-ups where I just went for it and ate it. But it eventually comes, and it eventually comes because there's aggression, but then there's controlled aggression. And I say to my athletes all the time, controlled aggression, which means just holding it back a gear. And if you are aggressive and you take off, the chances are you're going to hit the well earlier. Controlled aggression, you're still going to hit the well, but at least you've still got a little bit when you do hit the well to give something that you've got left. So I learned a lot from Mona in how we approach races and the tactical side of things, and like when to surge, when to make things hard. Like it was always with a hill, right? You grind the hill, but you don't stop at the top. You push over the hill and down the other side. You make the opposition think that you are not stopping.
Yep.
You put a surge in the most random of spots in a race that they're not suspecting. You know, when everyone's just sort of like getting a feel and everyone's great, attack, right? And then when someone's trying to do that to you, like work out how you want to counter that attack. Like if you just took off to counter someone's attack, it's not like cycling where you can draft, like all of a sudden you're expelling energy and then you become an athlete racing their strategy, which can backfire. So there was just a lot of things that I learned from Mona when it came to racing that made me better and made me get more out of myself. So when you talk about that grit, you know, I think my background, knowing that there was something there that I was always prepared to put myself in the hurt locker, but then learning how to do it appropriately when I raced, and learning that from Mona, that all helped.
So the random attacks in the race, what are you hoping to achieve psychologically to the opponents?
Break them.
Right.
You know, so you always get a lot of track runners that will step into road racing and they thrive on rhythm. You know, and so the idea is to break up the rhythm.
Right.
And that's why I liked cross country, because you could hit a tight corner and you could just hammer it and try to open a gap, break a gap. And it was all about breaking people, not just physically, but mentally. And you asked me before about love. Like I loved that. I loved being in a race and giving everything I had to do it. Now, some races I couldn't. But I didn't look at the athlete and turn around and say, you're lucky to beat me.
Yeah.
I looked at the athlete and I was like, man, you crushed me today,
Yeah.
right? Like I gave everything I had and I got beaten by a better athlete on the day. I could also go home disappointed in my performance that I didn't get the execution right, but I got beaten by a better athlete on the day. I just had to go back to work at next time in that situation, what would I do differently? So I really thrived on the competitiveness of racing and then also in training as well. And that was just something that I feel that in my career, that kept driving me each time. And disappointment is still competitiveness.
Yeah.
Right? Because you've got to learn what did I do wrong and what do I need to do better? I don't think I handled the disappointment of races in my younger days well. Like I'd get beaten in a race and it'd have nothing to do with the person that would beat me, but then I'd go out and I'd hammer 30 minutes hard for my cool down.
Wow.
And they'd be out there doing their cool down at like 5-minute K pace and I'm clocking 3-minute K pace, just so upset.
How do you even have the energy to do that after?
Anger.
Yeah, right.
Anger, you're right. You're angry, and so I'd always have to channel it in different ways. So, but like I said, I feel like that was also to my strength.
Yeah, and then when you started to, I don't know if mature is the word, but then like after a race, and what is your cool down when you started to mature a bit more, perhaps?
Well, I got older, and I didn't have the energy to go out there and do it. So, I think towards the end of my career, like I'd finish a marathon and there'd be no cool down. I'd just be tired. I'd go for a walk.
Yeah.
I tried to keep everything up until 2014 before I retired. The same, but the other thing I didn't factor in that, we talk about age grading now. So you get a lot of people that'll go, well, I'm 80 years of age and the world record, this person at 30, what would it mean at 80 that would equal that world record? So it's a grading scale. Yeah. It probably would have helped me back in my time to have sort of been more comfortable because I was just always 3-minute Ks is the training benchmark.
Right.
But you're 41.
Yeah.
Right. And honestly, 305, 307 was probably the graded benchmark for my age. But I was like, no, that's just what I've done my whole career. I've got to keep training at that. And I remember one day I did Deeks quarters and I had a rough morning and I pulled the pin after 4. And I went home and I was like, I'm going to go back and do it tonight. So I went back and I did it that night. I got to 4. And I was like, I'm coming back tomorrow. I went back the next day. And I was so used to running 64, 66s on that workout. And I was running like 68, 70s. But I was 10 years older. It was at altitude. But I just didn't balance that. And so, I'd had 3 cracks at it a day and a half, and I didn't complete the workout. But that also summed up just sometimes how stupid I was.
Well, you got beautiful merch on. I want to talk about the Geelong Running Festival. You've walked in with that, which I wanted to talk about. So good, you got that. How did it start? Is it September this year?
It's September this year.
And it was last year in September again? Or?
We've never had it.
Oh, you've never had. So this is a new one. So talk about what made you create it, and talk about all about it.
So I started the first Run Geelong event here in 2009, and it went through the stadium. It started and finished on the waterfront, went over the James Harrison Bridge, the Marlborough Street Bridge, and then unfortunately a situation arose through that saw me pack up and leave Australia and move to America. And I've been quite comfortable living in the US, and I didn't have really any desires to come home. But in 2018, one of the sponsors of Run Geelong had pulled out, and I got asked if I'd come back and take on the event again, which I sort of slightly opened the door a little bit for myself. And so I made some phone calls, and some people were excited. And then when I spoke to Barwon Health, they were like, no, it's our event. We're focused on delivering the event ourselves now. And so I sort of got a little frustrated because it brought some bad memories up for me from 2009. So I figured, you know what, it's about time Geelong had its first marathon. So I started working on a marathon event, and we did really well. We had in-principle support up until 2020, and then COVID hit. So that delayed everything for a couple of years. And then we tried to get back on track, but there were a lot of people that were in key agencies that had moved on. So it was really hard to try and get back on track with where we were. And then Councillor Eddie Contell ran the New York Marathon, and at the New York Marathon, he's like, oh my God, this is amazing. Why can't Geelong have something like this? And I just emailed him all the files I had, and I said, here's why. And so he's been very instrumental in like, no, we've got to do this. We need a running festival. So we were hoping to have it up last year. You can imagine it's a lot of work. So this event's going to cost us $1.5 million, and we have agencies such as ambulance, fire brigade, police. We have transportation, which is buses, trains. We then also have the city. We have state government, Vic Roads. We're impacting a lot. So we're talking 6-hour road closures for people. So it was like, how do we pull this together that everyone is happy? So we had 6 different versions of the marathon course that we could all finally agree upon. So we got the green light in July last year. So by the time the event comes around, it'll be 8 years that I've been working on this. But it's also then giving the reasons for us to come back home. So my wife was pretty keen a couple of years ago to move back. She had sort of got to the point where she was done with the US, and I was still coaching up until the end of 2024. But now that the event's been pushed out to 26, it means that I've still got another year in the US, because I'm not drawing a wage. We're putting everything we can into the event. So I still need to work. So that's why I'm backwards and forwards. But we're excited to have Geelong's first ever marathon. We'll have a half marathon. We have an 8K, and all races get to experience the city centre and the stadium. And on the Saturday morning, we've got an all abilities 1 mile and a kids 1 mile. So that'll take place September 20th, and then in 27 we're going to have a 2-day event where there will be a 5K and a 10K on the Saturday and a half marathon on the Sunday. We just couldn't put all those events logistically together and have a great experience for everybody all on one day. So yeah, we've been planning already 27's event, and we haven't even got to 26's.
That's great. Well, hopefully it's a good success. I was looking at the website, and it said you've partnered like with some grassroots and fundraised like 250,000.
That's our goal.
Yeah.
So what we've decided to do is stay neutral with a lot of things. So charity is one of them. There's so many amazing charities here in Geelong, and we don't want to align with one and empower one. We want to empower everyone. So we've come up with a concept where any Geelong charity can have up to 5 marathon registrations. So that's $200 a pop, which is $1,000. We will give that to them, but whoever they give them to, that recipient has to raise $500.
Right.
So that would be $2,500 that goes to the charity. We've already given $1,000 in free entry. We hope that they raise more. We've already got 12 charities that are tapping into that. So our goal is to have people that run, whether they're going to be fundraising themselves and getting sponsored per each kilometre or a set goal time. But then we've also got charities that are going to have their own ambassadors fundraising that we would like in our first year to raise $250,000 across all spectrums, which I think is a really good start for us. And we're putting... So the elite side of things we're not focused on in the first year. The elite side of things we're looking at in year 2. That would require more effort and an additional $250,000 to do that correctly. So we've decided that let's put our effort into the community, which is Geelong. This is their event. And then also put it into the charity to raise money. There's a lot of charities that need support, and hopefully through our event we can provide that for them.
And can people book and run now? Like when can they start booking?
So anyone can sign up. We open the registrations exactly 1 year out.
Yep, cool.
We're just about to launch our new merchandise. We've got a merch drop that's coming.
Well, I like this merch. This is actually clean.
Yep. So we've gone for a crisp, fresh look with for what we're doing, and that'll be ongoing each month. We'll have different things. So like in May, we'll have a pink Geelong Running Festival T-shirt, and that'll coincide with Mother's Day and also breast cancer awareness.
Yep.
And all proceeds through the sales of those shirts will be donated to breast cancer. So we want to be the catalyst of talk and inspiration, and making sure, as I said, that we stick to our roots, and that is that we need to get the Geelong community involved and thriving on this before we start to look at how we look at bringing in international athletes and recruiting around the country. Like, look what you have in your own backyard and then build it from there. So the response has been great. We're already at 1,700 or 1,800 registrations. Wow. 1,100 of that is just in the marathon. We thought we would have 2,000 participants. So we've got 5,000 spots, and 5,000 spots in the marathon and half marathon combined. So we went with 2,000 in the marathon and 3,000 in the half as a good first year. And we'll probably have 3,000 in the marathon and 2,000 in the half. So it won't matter. People, if they've signed up for the half, could easily go into the marathon. They've got their spot. And if someone a few weeks out from the marathon doesn't feel that they could complete it, they can drop back down to the half. Yep. So, yeah, we're trying to keep everything right. We want the experience to be great. We're going to have live music down at Steam Packet Place for all the participants when they finish. We've got an announcement coming soon with Blackman's Brewery. So we'll have them down there with 3 different stalls all set up for people to have food and a drink and recover in a great environment, rather than have this expo thing where everyone's trying to walk and navigate out. We want people to take a minute to enjoy what they've achieved with their family and friends, and encourage other runners that are still coming through. So all races start at 7, with the first participant coming through the line at 25 past 7. And runners will continually be coming through all the way up to 1:30 in the afternoon.
It sounds like a great event. This logo, is that the coast of the bay, or is that the track
Cryo
that
Bay.
you're doing?
That's Cryo Bay.
So the track that, or the route that it will be taken for the marathon, you said through the CBD?
Starts on the waterfront, goes around the waterfront through Rippleside up into St. Helens in North Geelong, crosses over just behind the back of the basketball arena, and then goes along Stubbs to Ballarat Road, over the Telegraph Bridge, so we cover a great section in there, onto the waterfront. Then it winds itself onto Mercer Street, so it'll go Mercer Street, Mallop Street, and then a ride on Moorabool Street. So you go up Moorabool Street and down to Cardinia Park, and you actually go in the stadium. So you'll come in off the Moorabool Street entrance, and you'll run half a lap around the stadium, and then you'll exit out on Park Crescent where the pool is. Then that brings you back into Moorabool Street, so there's a lot of crossover between both sides of the road with the runners. And then that brings you into Brougham, take a ride on Brougham and up into Eastern Park. And then as they go around Eastern Park, the half marathoners will stay in Eastern Park. The marathoners take a right out onto Limeburners, and then they'll follow that all the way out to Point Henry and then come back in. Gotcha. And then both races then wind their way back down onto the waterfront. So all start and finish there. We didn't want a 2-lap course. We wanted to show the best of what Geelong has, and I'll still say this for as long as I'm still here, that I believe Geelong is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. It's a bit hard to judge it at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, bumper to bumper in traffic, but Sunday morning, no traffic, to be able to run through that, going down Moorabool Street and seeing the bay and the Yuyangs in the background. I remember that as a 13-year-old kid when I did an event called the City by the Bay Fun Run, and it stayed with me for almost 40 years. So the fact that I now get to deliver that for the people that live in Geelong. I hope we can invoke some community pride and some community passion. And as I said, doing it for a good personal cause for themselves, for health and fitness, but then also doing it for a charitable cause as well.
And then someone like yourself, how many marathons have you done?
Over 30,
Over
but I'm not
30.
exactly sure.
How would you rate this one out of 10 in terms of a challenge?
So this is definitely going to be up there with your Bostons and your New Yorks. The course profile, if you take a look, it's about 190 metre gain in regards to that. But I honestly believe that it is as good as any of those races. People will talk about, they'll say one thing, they go, oh, it's too hilly, it should be flat. And then you go, okay, but we're heading out on the Port Arlington Highway, which is as flat as you can get. And then that's boring.
Yep.
Well, no, we don't like that. So it's really hard to please everybody. But regardless of the elevation gain in the course, I think it's an extremely scenic marathon. It shows the best of what we have. I would love to cross the Marlborough Street Bridge and over the river, but we're restricted in our first year of keeping Fine Street and the Breakwater Bridge open for traffic to bypass the course. But in order to overcome the boredom of the Port Arlington Highway, we have musical entertainment every mile.
Oh, that's great.
Andy Popejoy, who owns the Piano Bar,
Yes.
he's our director of entertainment, and he's going to have a musical act set up every mile out there. So we're going to have like a Tina Turner impersonator, an Elvis impersonator.
Oh.
We've talked with Karina Eccles and with the Watharon group because Stingray Bay is out in that area, Point Henry. So we're going to have a didgeridoo performance out there with the Indigenous group. We'll have like a big band playing at the turnaround point because there's no residents, there's no businesses. We're not impacting anything.
Yep.
So we're going to be loud and proud
This is good.
in that area. So there's a lot of thought. There's 8 years of thoughts
Yes.
that have gone into this event. And we know that in the first year, there will probably be some things that we're not going to quite get right. But when you look at Melbourne, that's been going for 47 years, Gold Coast has been going for 45 years, and Sydney Marathon's been going 25, we are achieving a lot of what took them a long time to achieve. We're doing that all in our first year.
I was going to say, has a marathon event ever come out with a bang like this? This is a big deal.
Well, that's why it's costing us 1.5 million too.
For sure. Well, it's going to be a great thing. To finish off, we've got 10 rapid fire questions. So off we go.
Yep.
First car.
Mini,
What colour?
brown,
Scariest moment in your life? Do we come back to it?
No, 1994, I got assaulted and was hit on the back of the head, and I woke up in hospital. I left, and then a couple of days later, we found out that I had a blood clot on the brain, a broken jaw, and a shattered cheekbone.
Oh my goodness. Best advice you've received?
There is no tomorrow.
Worst advice you've received?
The sun always comes up.
Troopy, this is an important one because you're a runner. Favourite vegetable?
Broccoli.
That's been said, I think, 3 times in a row now from our past guests. Favourite animal?
Boxer dog.
Favourite colour?
Blue.
Going out for dinner, what cuisine and what are we ordering?
Japanese, and it's the sushi and sashimi platter.
Yum. What's your favourite sushi?
Salmon.
Salmon. Favourite sport to watch? Aside running.
Look, I love football and I love NFL and AFL. But
Yeah.
AFL, I'm obviously a Cat supporter, so I love watching the AFL. And then obviously when the AFL is kicking off and finishing, then the NFL starts.
Who
So I
do you
get
go
the
for
best.
in the NFL?
The Denver Broncos.
And you've seen a few games over in
Seen quite a few, yeah.
Super Bowl's coming up.
Next week,
Next
not
week?
interested. It's San Francisco and the Seahawks.
They always seem to be in it, San Francisco.
No,
or not them?
No, the Broncos should have been in. We lost our quarterback in the previous round, so we had to play with our backup last week. And anyway, coach made some silly decisions, and
Not interested.
we're knocked out. So I'm not interested.
Not
no.
interested.
So I will be tuning in for the ads. The Super Bowl ads are pretty epic.
What are they like?
Oh, they're amazing. It's like just 30 seconds of complete stupidity, but they will do a reel, and everyone will be able to watch, like 30 different ads.
What's the entertainment? The pre-game entertainment? Do we know who it is?
So it's very controversial. They've
Yes.
got Bad Bunny, who's
don't
coming in, who's singing Spanish, and obviously America is in a bit of a different state at the moment.
Right.
But then they've also got Green Day.
Green Day, I'm aware of them. Last one. What is success?
It's an unbelievably good question. To me, success is striving for what it is that you want, giving everything that you have, and finding happiness regardless of the result.
Love it. Where can people find you, Troopy?
So I'm on Facebook and I'm on Instagram, just Lee Troopert 73. Our website is Team Geelong.
Yep.
And we also have the Geelong Running Festival, so they can use the contact form to get in touch with me there.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much, mate, for jumping on. Thank you heaps. Seriously appreciate it. And we wish you the best of luck for everything to come. So
Thanks for
mate.
having me.
Cheers. Thanks, mate.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Noah Jones Show. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and follow along for more amazing stories. See you next time.